Welcome back to the Money and Wealth Show. I'm Sterling Fox in conversation this week with Ian Gordon, the founder of the Long Wave Group, which is a different way of looking at the economy of the world. I assume this is a global issue, the long wave principle that you've developed in the wake of Nikolai Kondratyev's original theory is a global principle, correct?
It is, and Nikolai Kondratyev also acknowledged that, so that the whole world goes through the cycle almost in unison. So that
I suppose, Ian, the part that some people find a little discouraging about this is that it isn't very much fun, in that it takes a lot of the mystique, if you will, out of the economy. If you can track historically and go back a couple of hundred years or more and develop cycles of activity and read them with a fair degree of clarity, do people express a certain disappointment to you, a sort of sense that it's a fatalistic approach to the economy?
well, they've never expressed that. They've expressed a sort of a concern that we're now in the winter period of the, that we're now saying that we're going into the deflationary depression stage of the cycle as the debt is expunged from the system. That is disappointing to everybody because we're all going to be badly hurt by that process. On the other hand, we've had wonderful times since 1949. In the first 3 seasons of the cycle, everyone has done extremely well. Now we have to pay back. We've drunk a little too much, and we've got to suffer the hangover.
Now, how will this winter cycle that we're currently in, ending the 70-year current cycle, how will this play out? You figure, or I'm doing rough math here, which I shouldn't on television, but I'm figuring about 10 to 12 years left in the cycle. If the theory is true, we're in for a rough ride over the next few years.
I think it's going to be very rough. I mean, we've seen the process that began really with the peak in the stock market in 2007, the secondary peak, I would say, and then the crash into March 2009, and essentially the failure of many banks, both in the US and in Great Britain. And so that's the first sort of stage of what has happened. And now, I think we're very close to the second leg down, which is going to, it's a debt problem. And, what the governments have tried to do is to overcome a debt problem by creating even more debt.
Right.
Well, it doesn't make sense to me, and I don't think it should make sense to anyone, and that is a solution to a problem. I think it was Einstein who said that you can never solve a problem by trying to solve it by using the same means that got you into the problem in the first place.
Exactly.
So I'm only paraphrasing. He said it far more articulately than that. But so I think the next level down is going to be pretty devastating for most people. And it also means that, one of the things that really has to suffer is the stock market, because the stock market ultimately has to reflect the reality of the economy. And we are saying that as debt is wiped out of the system, that the economy is going to go into a massive depression with all the sort of problems that follows from that, like a collapsing GDP. I mean, US GDP between 1929 and 1933 collapsed by 45%. Unemployment went up to 25%. World trade basically stopped by 75%, and all these kinds of things. We're going to have to go through the same kinds of experience, and I think they could even be worse because the debt is far more significant now than it was after the 29 peak.
My parents and yours have vivid memories, and don't mind sharing them with us, of the Great Depression of the 1930s. Mine were kids in the 1930s. Is the next 10 years likely to be reminiscent of what the stories you and I have heard about all our lives the 1930s was like?
As I just said, I think actually it could be a little worse, simply because the debt is far bigger now than it was then. And it's much more international in scope than it was in the 20s. I mean, if you look back to the 20s, most of Europe had been basically bled dry by the First World War, so the countries of Europe were in debt.
Right.
But they didn't have the wherewithal to really enjoy a huge booming economy following the First World War. America, however, had a massive amount of credit. All these European countries owed money to America. She was the world's largest credit nation, so she had the boom, and the stock market boom, the Roaring 20s.
The Roaring 20s, indeed, absolutely.
Right? And then when her stock market collapsed in 1929, she went into depression, but the whole world went into a depression, but most of them hadn't been that healthy even before the depression because of the First World War. However, the real problems occurred in the United States because the United States was so wealthy, its banks were able to lend money everywhere, and they principally lent money into Europe, into Austria and Germany in the 20s. And when the Credit Bank failed in Austria in 1931, the American banks, particularly banks like J.P. Morgan, were desperate to bail out this bank because they knew that if they didn't, the whole credit system would collapse. And so they tried, but it failed, and the whole, basically the credit system of the world did collapse, and the entire world monetary system collapsed alongside it. But that brought down the U.S. banks, so that all banks in the U.S., 10,000 had failed by 1933.
Our guest this week on the Money and Wealth Show is Long Wave Group founder Ian Gordon, who has painted a rather dire picture of the months and years to come. So the question is, how do we set ourselves up to get through it in reasonably successful fashion? We'll find out after this break.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Ray. I'm the president and CEO of Gold Ray Resources Corp., a company that trades on the TSX Venture Exchange and has the majority of its operations in China. We are currently developing a resource there with limited production at this time. Our goal is to increase this production up to about 1,200 to 1,500 tons per day. And to do that, we are negotiating with several Chinese companies, one of which will become our partner either directly into the company or into the project, which will allow us to move the project up to the desired tonnage. For further information, please visit our website at goldray.com or phone 604-531-9639.